Premise: Avatar is a master work of world building because of its use of the real world. Welcome to Everything is Lit, where we treat anything and everything like literature and dissect it. In this episode of For the Culture, we are going to look at how to make a fictional world realistic by examining two of the best modern examples, Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. For those of you unfamiliar with the shows, go and watch them. Seriously. Released on Nickelodeon in 2005, the initial cartoon follows main character Aang on his journey to master all four elements to realize his destiny as the Avatar, the great force responsible for keeping the peace in this fictitious world. He's joined by other young companions, Katara and her brother Sokka, and later Toph and Zuko, and they each are forced to grow up fast in the midst of war and several more personal struggles. The sequel series, released in 2012, follows the next Avatar, Korra, in her struggle to master airbending and determine what it means to be the Avatar. Each story is too good to miss, and we can't discuss Avatar in depth without spoilers, so this is your final warning to hop onto Netflix and binge the two series. Assuming you've heeded my warning, let's jump in. Part of Avatar's charm is its incredible world building. In its series, Words We're Watching, Merriam-Webster defines world building as a component of storytelling that is different from the setting because it involves creating something brand new. Because of this, world building is typically associated with science fiction and fantasy. You may have heard the term in relation to tabletop roleplay or video games, but it also applies to storytelling in general. So, how do you build a new world? This question haunts all storytellers who want to create believable and immersive environments for their audiences. You could start massive, beginning with the cosmos and filtering all the way down to the singular character, like Tolkien famously did with Lord of the Rings. You could also begin with the central conflict of your story, and then fill in the details as you ripple out, like Harry Potter. You could even use a simple concept as inspiration and build context around it, just as Avatar co-creator Brian Konietzko did. He sketched a few ideas from which blossomed an entire world. World building involves many components, but we are going to focus on its cultural aspects. As we discussed in the previous For the Culture episode, culture shapes how we see the world and is shaped by our interactions with others. As we see in Avatar, the fictional cultures of the world significantly shape what each character believes, how they react to large-scale events, how they solve problems, who they trust and who they don't, and more. This element of world building helps the world feel more authentic. As most Avatar fans know, the series creators integrated a lot of influence from Asian cultures. According to the Avatar Fan Wiki, the concept of the four elements hails from Indian Hinduism and Buddhism. Hinduism specifically lists a fifth element, ether, which coincides with the Japanese philosophy of nothingness. These fifth element concepts formed the basis of the Avatar state, the space that the Avatar alone occupies outside of the original four elements. Additionally, each of the four nations in the world of Avatar is based on a real-world country. Shiota from Sci-Fi Wire says that the Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, Water Tribe, and Air Nomads are modeled after China, Japan, the Inuit Nation, and India, respectively, and we also see elements of Tibetan culture in the Air Nomads. There are obvious parallels that the nations present. For example, the wall protecting Ba Sing Se is based on the Great Wall of China in both form and function. Water Tribe apparel is reminiscent of Inuit clothing, and Aang's test to prove that he is the Avatar parallels the tests that the current Dalai Lama completed to show that he was a reincarnation of the 13th. However, these parallels run deeper than surface-level artifacts. When Konietzko and DiMartino looked to Asian cultures for inspiration, they borrowed history too. Specifically, as Shiota points out, the Fire Nation's military conquest is based on Japan's Taisho era. Following a period of rapid modernization and westernization, Japan sought to conquer the rest of Asia under the premise of spreading its fortune and establishing peace. We hear Fire Lord Sozin express similar desires in his flashbacks, and just as Japan's crusade led to a series of military conflicts ending with the country's involvement in the Second World War, the Fire Nation's century-long war has sparked defensive action from the other nations, rebellions both outside of and within the Fire Nation, and countless demonstrations of power. This is the central conflict of Airbender. It would have been easy to leave it here, to position the Fire Nation as the villains, the rest of the world as victims, and Aang and friends as the unlikely heroes. However, that is not what Airbender does. It makes royal family members Iroh and Zuko, and even Azula and Sozin, relatable characters as they reconcile with their duties to their people and their personal desires. The series also depicts what life is like within the Fire Nation. In Book 3, Chapter 2, Aang attends a Fire Nation school in disguise. While there, he sits through a history lesson that warps the truth as we and Aang know it, and positions the Fire Nation as the hero and savior of the world, while painting others as helpless or weak. The episode goes on to show the strict and austere conditions Fire Nation children learn under, and that, given the chance, they act like normal children. The takeaway is that, despite the political acts of any nation, We cannot condemn every single person within that nation. Further, it shows us just how people come to believe outrageously different things from what we know as truth based on how and what they are taught. And this too has a real-world equivalent. Post-World War II, the rest of the world came to understand that average German and Japanese citizens weren't aware of everything that their countries did, especially in places outside of their own. They were told versions of the truth that positioned their countries in the best light, and officials deliberately stoked their senses of pride in their nations to keep them obedient. Even those who participated in some of the heinous activities may have believed that they were doing the right thing. Stanley Milgram's famous obedience experiment showed just how easy it is to go against your own morals because an authority figure encourages you to. Even today, there are countries that censor the information their citizens consume or spin stories a certain way to bolster their side of the conflict. If the authority figures you trust, elected officials, scientists, teachers, are constantly telling you that a certain person or group of people are the bad guys, you'd be inclined to believe them. Take America's war on terrorism. Public officials stoke the fear of attack, sense of national pride, and moral obligation to justify conflicts abroad. Unfortunately, taken to its extreme, this has also caused a swell in xenophobia and Islamophobia. Jumping back into the world of Avatar, we see the Fire Nation do the same thing. Is it any wonder, then, why they would celebrate Avatar Day by burning effigies of Aang, Roku, and Kyoshi? So to recap, in designing the themes and conflicts of Avatar, the creators used real-world cultures, history, and even modern times as guides. By doing this, they invented a world that feels large, complex, and authentic. With this foundation established, the creators were able to tell more stories within it, most notably, the legend of Korra. Although it is set in a more modern era, Korra draws from the same influences as Airbender. For instance, the Inuit influences are more apparent since Korra hails from the Southern Water Tribe. An obvious example comes from Book 2, which introduces us to Unalaq and his fascination with the spirit world that sort of mirrors Inuit shamanism. In fact, he's indirectly responsible for opening the spirit gates, allowing spirits back into the human world to coexist. Even his stint as the Dark Avatar aligns with Inuit spirituality, in which both good and bad shamans exist. Shamans are mediators between the human world and spirit world, but whether they use their influence to help or harm depends entirely on them. Here's another example of real-world influences showing up in The Legend of Korra. Book 1 introduces classism into its setting through the divisive Amon, who uses non-benders' fear and suspicion of benders to start an uprising. Throughout the book, Korra and friends must contend with the have versus have-not struggle, even after defeating Amon. This mirrors many wealth and power struggles we have seen in societies countless times, even manifesting the same ways, from heated discourse and protests on the civil end to riots and coordinated attacks on the other. Avatar is hardly the first series to base fictional stories on actual histories and cultures. However, Avatar is unique in its portrayals of these cultures without reducing them to stereotypes. Sure, it's not perfect. For example, Shioda points out that both shows feature principally white casts, despite the obvious Asian tie-ins, but Avatar avoids tokenization by faithfully incorporating its real-life influences into the fabric of the world it has built. Tokenism occurs when a person or organization makes a symbolic rather than genuine effort to change the status quo. In media, it has come to mean including non-mainstream characters, actors, or cultures for the sake of appearing to care about diversity. Usually, such tokenism results in those inclusions feeling hollow or even misrepresented. In other words, they become tokens. For some groups, this happens so often that certain tokens have become tropes. For example, black side characters in horror and thriller films are often comic relief characters, and they usually die off or sacrifice themselves for another, usually white, character. Compare this to works like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead and Jordan Peele's Get Out and Us. They feature black characters who have agency and aren't just thrown into the films as racial stereotypes or fodder or to relate to black fans. But I'm digressing. Avatar does not tokenize the cultures it borrows from. Its inclusion of Asian and indigenous cultures and histories is deliberate and meaningful. Hindu and Buddhist principles are essential for Aang to unlock the Avatar state. Ba Sing Se's Great Wall is a crucial plot device, symbolizing their hubris and denial of the war. The martial arts that bending forms are based off of tie into the natures of the elements and the personalities of their benders. Even Iroh's obsession with tea is more theme than trope, as Redditor Pat_Speed points out. So to summarize, Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra construct immersive worlds by using real-world cultures and events as influences and by combining them in novel ways. Doing so goes beyond tokenization, since the influences are integral to the world, plot, and characters. The two series keep fans coming back year after year, sometimes even making new discoveries. What have you discovered in the world of Avatar? Want to try world building for yourself? You're in luck. StoryGrid features a great step-by-step guide for getting started. Examine master works, study the world around you, draw inspiration from current events, and use history as a guide. And if you made it this far into the video, you've already done step 1. Both Avatar series are masterworks in world building, providing clear examples of how to use actual cultures and histories to create a world without diminishing those original cultures. The 2 series also humanize their world by portraying realistic, flawed, and relatable characters based on real-world examples. So go ahead and get building. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can be the first to know when a new video is posted. And as always, stay lit.